Welcome to Finding Hope, The End to Suffering. Hosted by psychologist, author, and co-founder of the Colorado Institute for Conflict Resolution and Creative Leadership, Dr. Barry Weinhold, with national radio host, award-winning producer, and inspirational speaker, Patricia Raskin.
Hi everyone, we are back, and I'm Patricia Raskin, and we are talking with Barry Weinhold, who is the creator of this wonderful podcast series called Finding Hope, The End to Suffering. And I'm tagging along as co-host and very happy to be here. And so, Barry, I know you invited Eric on, and Eric's been telling his story of drug addictions and substance abuse in our previous weeks. And so today we're really going to continue talking about, how did he really get through? How did he really move through that? Because that's a real tough one.
Well, I think in the last episode, we ended with Eric kind of reaching or beginning the process of reaching the rock bottom, as often addicts have to. And he described a time when he ran his car into a tree at 65 miles an hour with no seatbelt and under the influence of several drugs and alcohol. And that was the beginning of him seeing that he needed to do something better, and took him a little bit of time to get there, but he finally did. And so he's going to tell us about that.
Eric? Hi, Eric.
Hey. Well, the first thing I want to give credit to is there were seeds planted along the way that had their moment of these tiny moments of reflection that I had, because certainly, it was a 3.5 year struggle for me in addiction, and then a year long where I was really needing to make a change and making that decision, which I think is relatively short compared to maybe a lot of other people's experience. So in some ways I was very lucky. That's why I credit, the seeds that were planted along the way. I had some awareness of what it was happening to me and what I could do to make a difference in my life. And so I'd say, the first thing was to really look at myself in the mirror, and which is that day that I ended up going back to heroin use, even after the most intense commitment not to. I guess having that sense of will broken. And so I'd say the first place I started was radical vulnerability. And I didn't know to call it that at the time. I don't know where I got that idea at the time, but that's just what I started with. I didn't have a whole lot of hope at that time. I knew something needed. The only thing motivating at that time was just the pain that I had been in for so long. And so I decided to just basically turn myself inside out and tell the world what it really was. And that was true for me with my peers. That was true with me and my family and my therapy. And I had taken every possible moment to just basically turn every rock over. And that's where it started. I'd say the next thing that really changed for me was confronting the terrible things I thought about myself and the world. I had some pretty negative outlooks and negative beliefs, and somebody along the way taught me that mattered, and that the quality of my mind and perception was a direct reflection of my experience. That those two things were in some ways the same, because you can always look and find crap, right? And so, and I guess I just decided to go all in there and just see what happens. And my experience just really started to change in a way. I didn't just reinforce it by thinking it to be true. I also went and I gave that message to other people. I looked for what was good in others. I used affirmations. It was with my voice, and it was in my thoughts, and it was in my actions, where I reinforced this way of thinking and living. I guess I had it in my head that eventually it would become natural to be positive about life. Man, it was scary and painful to go through, but I started to have pain with grace, because it all was paying off, and I could see the evidence of that every day. And so also too, I think what really gave me a lot of hope in the beginning was hearing those stories of others, those who had been through a similar thing as me, and I listened for them. I found lots of stories, and I didn't just listen to the ones that were presented to me, but I went and looked for them. And it was
and I mean, that's what we were talking about before, is the role models, actually seeing those role models, which is what you did, but you had to want to do that, Eric, before you,
I did.
right. It's not going to come to you unless you want it.
Yeah.
And you can find it, but the initiation has to come from you. Barry?
Yeah, I always say motivation is the door locked from the inside.
Right.
And you have to unlock it yourself. You can't depend on somebody to do it for you.
Yeah. And it comes by doing.
Right.
I become more motivated because I got the result, or something like the result I was looking for.
Yeah.
Right. So when I go back to do it again, done this before.
That's how all change happens. I mean, everyone I've ever worked with, I say, just take one step and see what happens. And if that feels good, then that gives you confidence to take the second step.
Right.
And so on. So that's the way you find your way out of this, out of recovery.
But my other question is, was it step by step, Eric? It wasn't like, oh, I just saw this. Now it took a while, correct? Yeah. Because it took a while to get into it. So it took a while to move through it.
Yeah. In some ways, I felt I could only keep my head above water for months. It was still the best I'd ever felt in my life. But I mean, I carried with me the craving and all the negativity that had been eating me alive for years. And so I think I had that insight somehow. And I think it was probably the people I'd worked with at that time that was going to be the case, that these thoughts and ways of living and behaviors were not going to go away, and probably not for years, maybe.
My question to both of you is, how do you sit through that pain and that craving, if you will, and just move through it? That's a hard one. It's hard to sit with that when all you want to do is just run for the substance, or run for whatever it is, whether it's a behavior or a substance.
Yeah.
There's something in you that allowed you to just say, no, I'm just going to sit with this and I'll eventually get through it. Talk about that a little bit, because that's a hard place.
Mm-hmm. I found that it's easiest to just have it under illumination. That pain is so compounded if it's hidden. If it's put away, if it's shoved behind me. And I found that I could not be in that pain for very long if I had just basically turned it inside out. Let it out, right? Whether that's through emotions, whether that is with a loved one, or with a trusted individual. If I were to just allow it to run its course and play that tape through, it's not that bad. It doesn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How would you say that differently, Barry?
Yeah,
Well,
Barry.
There's a couple of steps in that process that, first of all, you have to kind of reach a level of acceptance. And most people are in a lot of denial when they're in addictions. And so it's, first of all, and I think that's what AA sometimes does for alcoholics. It says, accept who you are, accept what's going on. And that's the first step. And then the second step is, make better decisions. Use some discernment about what you do. You know that there are certain things that you do that by this time what is not good for you. And if you continue to do what's not good for you, you know where you're going to end up, or other people will tell you where you're going to end up. So those are two of the most important parts of kind of getting your head around all that, is first accepting, and then also having some sense of, I'm in charge now. And if I make poor decisions, I know there's going to be consequences. And do I want those? No. I've been there, done that. So,
Right.
yeah. Does that make
It's
sense?
hard for people if they've been told at an early age that they can't be that vulnerable.
Yeah, right.
So I think I got lucky there that was it was safe enough for me to do that in those early days.
Yeah.
So it wasn't hard to find for me. And when I did find that, it didn't have anywhere to go. You know.
So, now years later, when you are through that part, when you get anxious or when you start to feel down, what do you go to? Is it exercise? Is it running? Is it karaoke? Is it singing? What do you go to now?
People.
Mm,
Every time.
mm.
I mean, most
I do
of the
too.
time, yeah, I go to those I feel closest to. Whether
Yeah.
that's my
Yeah, I do the same
soon-to-be
thing.
wife or my parents. I'm really close with my family these days, and I credit my recovery to that. And then friends and coworkers. I'm lucky enough to also work at a place where I feel comfortable enough, going to my boss or my supervisor or my colleague and just laying it out there. If I'm anxious about the group I'm going to have to run next because I've never done it before, that's fine. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
I feel a hell of a lot better. So
Mm.
That's healthy.
Mary, what do you think?
I think that's the healthiest thing you can do is instead of bottling it up, share it with somebody you trust, and get some support, get some, basically you don't have to have anybody telling you what to do. Just somebody who's a good listener is a valuable kind of ally in that recovery process.
yeah, that's important because a lot of times we already know the answers.
Yeah.
So, especially later on in our recovery and process. And so just somebody to be there with us in that space.
I know your recovery process was quite interesting, and I know you were in uh, in rehab centers for quite a while. And talk us about what that was like and how you made your way through all that. I think that might be interesting to people because
Yeah.
kind of mysterious that people go into rehab and then they come out a different person. Well, what happens in the process?
Yeah.
Some do.
And some enough time has passed in order for me to practice, just given the reality of the brain damage that occurs and how long it takes to heal.
Yeah.
But that's not all. Obviously, there was a lot of things. The first few things I had mentioned today were starting with this place of vulnerability and being completely open and honest, and then looking for ways to have a better outlook on things, and all of the ways of doing that and reinforcing those things. That's where it started, and that was in my first 2 weeks in the detox program. I had spent the next 2 months following that just in 12-step meetings, which were helpful. However, again, not sure of the meetings I was going to had the guidance I was needing. And so I didn't have a sponsor or anything like that, but I practiced what I did know before kept me going for at least that long. I think carrying the message and being of service to other people in that time too helped me feel a lot better about myself. But in treatment, I went through a 4.5-month residential program here in Colorado. That's what brings me out here. I'm actually from Detroit originally. Was mostly boys and men. We had some girls at times too, but it was probably an average of 15 to 30 clients, and it was group therapy most of the day and individual counseling. The biggest part of mine was the family systems component to it. On day one of individual therapy, we went back all the way. Well, what is mom like? What was dad like? How do you remember him? How do you remember your siblings? What were those relationships like? And we really went far in weeks of exploration leading into a 8-hour intensive session with all of my family present. And this was my stepmom and my biological mom and my biological dad and all of my siblings with 2 therapists. And everyone had done a lot of preparation. So we had right where we needed to go so we could waste
We lost Eric.
So, Eric, how did you find that worked?
Did we all freeze?
Um,
Patricia froze. Eric froze.
I think we're back. I think we're good. Can you hear
So
Eric?
I can hear you guys.
Yeah. So,
there we are. We're back.
Barry, so Eric was talking about sort of the family intervention where everybody got together.
Right.
And so you found that very effective. Was it a little scary? How did that work for you? That's a lot of people
Yeah,
together.
it was pretty scary. I mean, I had a lot of time to. Well, I lost the sound.
I can still hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That's weird. But anyway, it was all this planning that went up to him so we could normalize what was to happen. We were able to play through what could happen and work through every possible situation. Plus, I was lucky enough to have all of the family there with really good intentions. And so we all came with a very positive attitude. And I think
Right.
we were willing to take a look at things. You know, I mean, I was there to tell my dad things that I never had talked to him about before, or what it felt like to feel alone as a kid, or to what it felt like to lose my mom in those moments where she was hospitalized. And what I just saw growing up. And then also my family got to say the same at what their intentions were. And I just got to hear a different side of my family and what it felt like the love was always there. And so I was in a position to forgive them. I was able to forgive them and then forgive myself, because I was able to see that it wasn't the result of some ill will or anyone's desire to do harm. It was just simply how things played out. And we could cough it up to that and see the future. What are our intentions moving forward? And I actually, by the time it was all finished, they actually gave me the opportunity to run that part of the group on our own time. We actually got a house locally in the city where I was without therapists there. And I don't know, I guess I had some of this naturally because I wasn't a therapist. Obviously, I was a client with 6 months sober. And I remember all of us just becoming emotional with one another, and we were able to get specific with what that looked like, and then start to practice that right away of what we want life to look like for my biological parents, who had conflict for a decade, were willing to come together in a way that I'd never seen before. And that, I think seeing that was just amazing.
Right. But again, everybody was willing to work on this. And that's the key, right? I mean, that's the key to the progress. And that's the key to the healing. Now, not everybody has that, right, Eric? I mean, I'm sure you work with clients that they don't have family members that are willing to come in and do this together.
Right.
So, would love to get your comments on that. When you work with clients that are not in that same situation and they have to get the support elsewhere.
Yeah, who aren't lucky enough to have that family come together in that way, right?
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Not everyone gets that opportunity. And I don't know if it might have taken me a little longer if I had not gotten that. And so, yeah, I think it's important to know what to look for when you're looking for a therapist and you're looking for someone to support. I mean, I think counseling is probably the direction to go in, professional. Who knows?
Barry?
What was that?
What do you think about what
Oh,
Eric said?
yeah. I mean, I tell anyone who talks to me about a referral to a therapist, I said, have your questions and interview them.
Yes.
And
I was just going to say
and ask them what work they've done on themselves and their own suffering, their own pain. And if they said that's none of your business, that's not the right therapist for you. You want somebody who's going to be at least honest emotionally with you and upfront and vulnerable as well. And so that and I do that with my clients too. Everyone who wants to come and do therapy with me, I generally have a free 20-minute consultation with them, and we lay it all out. And then either I decide or they decide. If we both think that this is going to work, then I say, okay, let's try it for 3 sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And if it works after 3, then we'll do another 3. So I don't like to do long-term work. I like to get to the point of things as quickly as possible and put time limits on it, so people aren't just coming and shooting the breeze. They're there to work, and they're there to get healthy. So that's how I work.
And that brings us to a great point here to continue next week.
Yeah.
What we're going to talk about next is, what are those things, Barry, that you can do to keep that hope alive?
Yeah.
We're finding hope, we're ending suffering. What are those daily things that you can do every day, when you're in recovery, that keeps you there and keeps you moving forward? And I know Eric can address that next week. And so, we're going to pause for now, but we'll come back with Eric. I'm Patricia Raskin, co-hosting with Barry, the creator of Finding Hope, the End to Suffering. And we'll see you then.
Right.
This episode was brought to you by the Colorado Institute for Conflict Resolution and Creative Leadership. Find out more about these resources at weinholds.org. Dr. Weinhold is the author or co-author of 75 books on psychology, including his latest book, Get Real: The Hazards of Living Out of Your False Self, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and more. Patricia Raskin is the host of the nationally recognized program, The Patricia Raskin Positive Living Show, and is currently heard on voiceamerica.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and more. New episodes of Finding Hope, The End to Suffering can be found every Wednesday. If you like the show, please leave a review and give us a rating.